Let me show you some charts, those who are listening, that this is a simple bar graph that shows that the Bush administration, when it came to office, it had a phenomenal inheritance, a budget in surplus over the next 10 years by $5.6 trillion. That was January 2001. By January 2004, that surplus of $236 billion was gone, vanished. In 4 years' time, we went from a $236 billion surplus to a $412 billion deficit. This happened under the policies and the watch of the Bush administration. This next chart portrays out over time the deficits of this administration and previous administration. Here's the first George Bush administration, the first of Mr. Bush. There was a significant decline in the budget at that point in time, but when the Clinton administration came to office, President Clinton sent us a budget in February of 1993. On February the 22nd, the first full significant action taken by his administration. And every year after the adoption of that budget by one vote in the House and one vote in the Senate, the bottom line of the budget got better and better and better, to the point where we were at this point right here, 1997, 1998, the year 2000. The budget was, in those years, budgeted balanced for the first time in recent memory. And then in the year 2001, the year 2000, we had a surplus of $236 billion. Mr. Bush II came to office here. As you can see, the bottom line got worse and worse and worse until there was a slight pickup here. But then in the out years, 04, 05, 06, 07, the budget got worse and worse and worse to the point that it runs off the chart, the bottom of the page. And that's the deficit we're now looking at, a deficit of as much as $1.4 trillion. Now, that would be a concern under any circumstances, but in the present situation, the deficits that we have incurred over the last 10 years have largely been funded and financed by foreigners, Japan, China, Great Britain, Europe, Pacific Rim countries. They have run trade surpluses with us and used the surplus dollars they hold to buy back our Treasury bills. It's a convenient short-term arrangement, but over the long term it means that foreigners own more and more of our debt, and you find it hard to be totally independent as a country, certainly the world's superpower, when you're also the world's largest debtor. As of 2008, the total amount of foreign-held Treasury securities had tripled under the Bush administration. Starting out at $1 trillion, it rose to $3.1 trillion, over $2 trillion during the period 2001 through 2008. That's the accumulation of foreign-held Treasury bills and certificates. As for the total debt of the United States, this is where we began, $5.7 trillion in 2001. That's where the total debt of the United States stood when Mr. Bush came to office, a substantial sum, but every year that number went up and up and up, to the point where when he left office a couple of weeks ago, the deficit, the amount of debt, stood at $10.7 trillion, nearly doubled in an 8-year period of time, from $5.7 trillion to $10.7 trillion. And as a consequence of that, we're feeling the effects of it in all sectors of our economy. Would the gentlelady from Massachusetts care to make a comment, a statement? I gladly yield time to her. Before Mrs. Sanger spoke, here are just some highlights of the economy that we also inherited, so that we've got, in effect, a dual negative double whammy. A budget deficit that is soaring out of sight, and an economy which is contributing to that deficit, and it makes the effort to reduce and dispel and wipe out the deficit ever harder. For example, here's the unemployment rate. It stands at a 17-year high, nearly 600,000 jobs lost last month. Against a headwind like that, it's very, very difficult to bring the budget deficit down. In fact, you need to have countercyclical policies in effect that are actually adding to the demand of the economy in order to get the economy back on track, back on its feet, which is what we're doing right now. Here's another chart, which shows that what happens in an economy like ours, where unemployment is close to 8%, revenues that were expected last September when the Congressional Budget Office did its forecast of the budget, the revenues that were forecasted then are not obtaining. We're $2.7 trillion short over that period of time, 09 through 18, in the revenues that were assumed last September, which changes the basis for all of our policies when you simply don't have the funding that you anticipated having only a few months before. And it also shows you one of the frightening features of this current recession is how fast it's coming on. It lingered for some time. There were definite earmarks that we were headed towards a recession, but now that it's here, we're seeing in 1 month 500,000 to 600,000 jobs lost is tragic evidence of what's befalling us. 3.6 million jobs lost since January of 2008. 3.6 million jobs lost since January of 2008. Mr. Moran, I'll gladly yield to you for any comments you would like to make on this topic.